Hi, my name is James. Welcome to King's Fine Woodworking. Today I'm going to show you how we do an unboxing and assembly of our flagship table saw sled. These sleds are just about ready to head out the door for their new homes, but I've had a few requests on how exactly do we do it, what's the easiest way to do it, and we do have a video or a series of a couple of videos on building the whole thing, but collectively they're a couple of hours long and people just wanted something shorter and quicker and simpler, and that just involves just the sled that's already pre-purchased, so I thought I would put that together for you today. And if you would like to get one of these flagship crosscut sleds for yourself, there is a link in the description below the video. And I have put them back on sale for $100 off of the regular price. We pack all of our sleds in clean recycled cardboard. It's an excellent use of this material. It gives it one more life, and it's good on landfills, easy on landfills, and it's good for recycling or for compost for your garden. You don't really have to worry. Nothing is so small that it's going to get lost in the cardboard. It's all pretty easy to see. When you open these two pieces of wood, however, you will see a set of plans. It's a printed set of plans, and the top adhesive ruler, if you should decide to use that. The first thing to do is to open up the plans to this page here that contains all of the hardware. I believe that's page 40, yes. And then we're going to kind of open the hardware bag and we're going to lay the hardware out according to how it's laid out there, and that's just going to allow us to assess it and look at all the parts, all the pieces, and see where it goes. And then we'll just set this aside so that we can work. Alright, yep, so page 40 here, and this is all the hardware that goes with the sled. There's a little description under each section there and tells you where on the sled these pieces of hardware go. And I've laid out all the pieces, similar pieces, together. They either come individually or in pairs, or in the case of the back, there are 4 of them that are identical. The safety box there, and there it is, all laid out for you to see. It looks like a big mess, but it's not. It's really fast. In fact, you can glue the base part together in probably 4 minutes, and I'll show you that. But let's take a look real quick here. What I've done is I've taken each page at the beginning. So this is part 1, the parts that are blue. That's the sled base bottom outside runners. That's these. And you can see I've also stamped them on the part, so it's really easy to identify. So if you ever had a damaged part or something like that, all parts are interchangeable and they can be swapped. There's part 2. That's the inside bottom board. And every single part is identified on its own separate page in blue. This is part 3, the sled base upper outside boards. That's these guys right here. And they're marked on the sled, or marked on the board itself, and just so on and so forth. They are all indicated and shows you how many, what the quantity is of each one, and it's real quick and easy to identify them. If you ever need a part, then you can identify it by part name or by part number. I just want to show you one thing that's different here. The back fence does consist of several different parts, but we've already assembled that for you. We've cut it, assembled it, drilled the holes, attached the removable section and everything, so you don't have to do that. So the best way to start this build is to take 2 straight edges or levels and put them at right angles to one another. And I'm showing that we've established a right angle by using a framing square. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, so you don't need a high precision square. Just a framing square is fine. But we want to create a right angle, and we would like to put this down on a flat surface. Table saw is ideal. I'm using Tight Bond Speed Set wood glue. The joint will tack up really fast and be strong after about 5 minutes, and it'll set probably in about 15. And I'm going to do a quick run through. I put some wax paper down, but I'm going to do a run through on how to assemble this. It's really fast, so follow along. I'm even going to move a little bit slow so that you can kind of see what I'm doing. I don't want to make it seem like I'm rushing to it, but I put the bottom outside runner on the left. I put the center board about in the middle, and then I will set the top outside runner there and just run it up there between those 2 boards. That's the left half of the sled. Right half's the same thing, the bottom outside runner, and then the top outside board right there. And then if you take a look on the outside, I'm going to be able to get these things flush with each other just by pushing them up together like that. And that's it. And then we're going to put the 2 top inside boards on the sled. one on the left, one on the right. That's it. It took me 50 seconds or so to show you how this goes together. It's pretty quick. Gluing it just takes a few minutes. And that's the whole base of the sled. There isn't anything more complicated than that. And I'm going to show you kind of how I do it all. So all you really need to do is put glue on one side here. I know I'm a big fan of gluing both sides, but it's just completely unnecessary here. This is such a gigantic glue surface area compared to the piece, the size of the pieces involved, that it's very, very strong. So once again, that's the bottom outside runner. We'll put that on the left. And then we will put the bottom cinder board in place. Right there. I probably should have put some glue on that first, but you know, I didn't think that far ahead. And then the top outside board will sit on top of that runner. I'll move this out of the way, and I gotta move it all the way out of the way so that I can put glue on it now. That's probably why I should have put glue on it first, but no big deal. Even though it's quick setting glue, it's not that quick. So put glue here, and we'll rub it in, and you see, if you don't really pay attention to what you're doing, you're going to get glue on everything, but really that's okay. The more glue you spill, the better. Titebond likes that. I just like to get the whole surface coated. If some goes up on the miter bar, it really makes no difference. And we'll lift that up, and we'll put this in place and snug them up together, and that's that part. That's the left side of the sled. Right side of the sled's the same thing. You'll note I learned from my mistake, and I put glue here first this time. And we'll spread that around. If you wear some gloves, it sure is a lot faster than trying to use a brush, because it is a pretty big surface area, so it just takes a second or two to spread the glue with the glove on than it does to, it's a lot faster than it is to spread that with a brush. And then the bottom outside runner, of course, it's the same procedure. We'll put glue on that. I like to get the whole thing covered. It's a pretty thin layer is just fine. It doesn't have to be a thick layer, of course. This is really the slowest part of the build, is applying the glue. I guess I could have cut this out, but I was really trying to show you in real time that it's a pretty quick procedure. I could have sped through this, but I wanted to show the whole thing to you and show you. I think it takes around 5 minutes to glue this up, actually. And we'll kind of let it sit there, and we'll get it close. I haven't really dropped the right side yet. I'm getting it pretty close. Then I'll drop the right side, and we'll go ahead and slide it in. And we'll use this board to slide it in nice and snug. And if you don't get it perfect, it doesn't make any difference. It would look nicer, but you know, it's not going to affect the accuracy. Everything that affects accuracy we've done for you. The assembly of this is really just kind of cosmetic. But it had to come out this way because I couldn't ship anything this big, and it needed to be flat packed, so I certainly couldn't ship the whole thing assembled. There's that, and now of course we need to put the two top inside boards. And in each case, their position's pretty straightforward for most everything here, because they'll run up against the miter bars and then back down towards me there against the straight edge, the level that I have in place. So it's pretty easy to put it together and pretty hard to mess it up, I suppose. So I'm looking at the timestamp. It did just take a touch over 5 minutes, so it is about 4 or 5 times slower to put the glue and everything there than it is to just assemble it. But it's not a bad idea for you to run through a pre-assembly like I did, just to make sure you got it right. You know, watch the video, run through a pre-assembly. You can certainly open YouTube on any smartphone, and you can watch this on a smartphone, and then just kind of follow along. You know, you can hit pause and whatever to make sure you get it together correctly, although it isn't too hard. There are a total of 7 boards involved in gluing the base together. And we'll glue the other side. And one of the reasons for multiple boards, the sled certainly could have been done with just a single base and cutting these dados out, but we managed to cut off a lot of weight by eliminating space at the bottom, and by doing it in segments like this, allowed us to have the zero clearance inserts and various features like that, which are nice. Obviously, it means there's a few more minutes to assemble a project like this. Overall, it really isn't that bad. I think we assembled the Incra Miter 5000 sled, and it took us about 75 minutes, maybe, hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes. Our sled, I've assembled quite a few, so it's not a fair assessment as to what it would take a person, but we can do ours in about 15 minutes, start to finish. That's everything. That's the sled, putting the fences on, and doing the 2 auxiliary components. And we'll put some weight on that and let it sit for a few minutes. If you don't have weights, no problem. You could just use pin nails. Just use short pin nails, like 5/8 pin nails, so they don't go all the way through. And make sure you know where board meets board. You wouldn't want to just nail right in the middle of the upper right board, because there's nothing below it. So know where you're putting pin nails. That one may be a little bit far away, but you can see it's pretty tight. The pinholes don't really interfere much. So while we're letting that cure, we will go ahead and assemble this block. This is the safety box, and this is kind of the thing that gives the blade a place to go. All 4 of these are the same size, these pieces. So if you put it together just like I'm doing here, the 2 on the outside, the left and the right sides, they'll go outside of the box, and then the other 2 pieces will go in between those. So the box is kind of oblong. It's wider than it is from front to back, and that's how it's supposed to be. You can check it by putting the top piece of plastic on like we did. So this one I definitely want to use pin nails because it's much faster. I'm putting that back one up to kind of support this guy. So we got the glue in. I'll just press it tight. PVA glues has to have this nice property where if you apply pressure after putting them on, they'll give you a real high initial tack. So they'll kind of stick together real good so they don't slide very easily. So I'm putting it in place and then applying some good downward pressure to get that tackiness up so it'll hold in place better. When you're nailing, you don't want to nail too close to your fingers. See how I move my fingertips out of the way? Sometimes the nails will turn sideways, and that's never fun when you get stabbed by a nail. And then we'll nail the other half of it here together. I always move my fingers out of the way just before I squeeze that trigger so I don't get a pin nail flip out sideways. Pin nails aren't too bad. They don't usually do that. Sometimes finished nails are a little more prone to doing that. And now we'll peel the protective plastic off of the plexiglass there. That kind of prevents scratches during shipping. And we'll put just a thin layer of CA, a thin bead of CA all the way around. You can use medium or thick CA. They both work just fine. And you just put that down in place. Get it positioned how you want, and then we'll let it sit there for a few minutes. You can spray it with accelerator if you like. And now by now that glue on the other thing is kind of tacked up, and the glue here has, and so we'll go ahead and just use an old chisel, something that still has some sharpness to it, and then scrape off the excess glue, and that's really it. Now we can pull the levels apart, and there it is. That's really the whole sled base. Now we just have to attach the fences to it, and we're good to go. I just want to show you something here and see how these don't line up. I was very fast in putting it together, and I allowed this to happen because I want to illustrate that there is nothing that you can do that will really mess this up. All of the critical functions have been handled, and this is actually just a cosmetic issue. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and put the front fence on. We slid the T-bolts in and put those knobs on, and we'll put them in place. And we'll clamp down. Remember, the front fence is removable. I'll show a little quick clip at the end of all the functions this sled does. But I won't put that at the beginning. I won't make you sit through that to see the assembly. If you want to get your own flagship table saw sled, use the link in the description below for 25% off. So we want to screw that down nice and snug. I should have put a washer under that. I didn't, but that's okay. And then one thing you want to do before we get too far in the sled, and right now, in fact, what you want to do is we want to screw this down really well. We're going to pull these screws out later so we can use the functionality of that fence. But since the back fence, you don't want to screw through the T-track, so miss those. And you can see about where I'm putting little dots. That's where I'm going to put screws. 2-inch screws are ideal. So we're going to hold this down really securely with screws. You get a countersink bit like this. I'm kind of fooling you because that's this is about a year-old countersink bit in my hand, but there's a new bag right there, a new package of them. So this countersink bit is going to burn my wood a little bit, but that's okay. But we want to hold this fence down very, very securely until after the back fence has been fully squared and is fully secured by screws. Then we can unscrew these extra screws, because one of the two fences needs to be very secure before you have any stability in the sled. So right now it's the front fence that's very secure, because once we cut the sled in half, we don't want it to wiggle back and forth. So that's why all the screws. So let's take a look at this. The opening goes towards the front and the removable section goes towards the right. And you can see there's a little bit of a chamfer here that goes to the bottom in the front, and that allows for dust to pass through without clogging up against the fence and messing up your cut. And now would be a good time to hit any of these rough spots and take off some splinters from the milling that we did. And you can do that on the fence or anywhere you want, just some 120 or 180 grit sandpaper. And we'll put this in place where we want it, and we're going to make sure that we put it in the center. From the left and from the right. And so I've got my double square here that allows me to measure the same distance on both sides, and that ensures that my fence is in the center. Once I have it set up, I'm going to clamp it down nice and snug before I screw it down. That way it doesn't move on me when I drive the screws in. And if you didn't like the way that this thing didn't fit perfectly flush, you can always go around the perimeter and with a little tiny block plane and some sandpaper, and you can sand everything back to flush so that cosmetically your sled still looks flawless. And there's that. That's one of those that was about a 1/16 of an inch off, but now it's back to perfect. Okay, so we want to put some screws in. We want to put 2 screws, one on the left, one on the right, because we're creating a pivot system to adjust the fence. Remember, the fence is going to pivot in and out this way to get into squareness with the blade. And that's where everything critical comes in. When you do the 5-cut method, that's what happens. So you don't want to put a screw through this removable section, because you want to be able to remove it. So that's the line here. You'll be able to see it easier if it's not on video. And if you look at the top, you'll see that this removable section plugs into the fence. So we don't want to put the screw up through this middle plug that plugs into the main part of the fence either. That's important. We probably want to put our screw over here. So if I note where that is before I put the screw in, you'll save yourself some grief later. Maybe make a little note there, a little mark there. Helps you know where to put it. And there we go, 2-inch screw into that, and that'll hold it nice and secure. And we'll do the same thing somewhere over here. Doesn't really matter where, plus or minus an inch anywhere, from the edge is fine. But I'll make a little mark. You don't have to measure. It's not really that important. This screw back here is kind of going to be the hinge or the pivot screw. And I'm set up to drill this. That's our countersink. And then we'll go ahead and sink the screw. Make sure you get it below the surface. I guess it didn't matter too much there because that's a recessed portion. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Make sure that fence hasn't moved forward or backward. And it still looks flush with the edge. I probably should go ahead and replace that countersink bit. There we go. Now, even though we got 2 screws in it, the sled base is not really secure, so we have to leave all those screws in the front. Hey, sometimes, your back fence will come a little bit warped, and you'll need to clamp a straight edge to it at the top before you start this procedure because you want it to be straight. The warping is normal for plywood. So it comes with we put a small screw in it to begin with, and you can use the small screw if with no head on it if you want to. It's kind of a neat look there if you're not going to take it off very often. And we also will supply you with a knob with a screw on it so that you can use that in case you want to take it on and off a little more frequently. That quick release knob makes it a lot easier. I'm erasing my pencil marks from earlier. All right, let's talk about the miter bars for just a second. So the miter bars are almost always a teeny bit tinier, a teeny bit smaller than your miter slots in the saw. And so that's why they have set screws that we will put in them. Now I've put all the set screws in except for the very last one here. So I'm going to put that one in. And when you put the set screw in and push it all the way through, you'll probably push out some wax. The wax is in there to lubricate to facilitate the cutting of the threads. So don't worry about that. Your miter bar's not falling apart. It's just an aluminum lubrication wax for cutting those. So there you go. And it's only just going to stick out a teeny tiny bit. And that's not enough. It's sticking out too much, so I can't push it in there. Oh, there it is. Okay. And so we'll just make a fine adjustment, in or out, whatever, because we want it to be able to slide in. That's not going in at all. So maybe screw it back out a teeny tiny bit, quarter of a turn, eighth of a turn. Now it's in, and see there's almost no wobble in it now. All right, let's go to the next one. Well, the screws are already in there, of course, the set screws. So we'll adjust them just a little bit so that it goes into the slot, but has no wobble to it. That's kind of the key. We want it to move smoothly in the slot, but have no wobble. I'm adjusting each of them as I go. You will have to put them all in. I just have preloaded these. And we're just fine-tuning each adjustment. You only have to do this once, and then it's all set. And this you'd have to do with any sled that you have. That's how you fine-tune it. And there it is. There's no wobble in it whatsoever. You see the thing is not moving side to side. And yet it still slides back and forth very nicely. All right, so we're going to do the identical thing to the other one. I'm not going to make you sit through all that, though. No big deal. But look at these. These are the countersink things. It's important when you start this process that those countersinks are down, because you have to put screws up through those into the sled. Just thought I would mention that there. And then when you do put the screws in on the left and the right, this is something that Mike Taylor from Taylor Toolworks just talked to me about a few weeks ago, and I thought it was brilliant. So on the left side, you'll put them in one way, and on the right side, you'll put them in the other way. That's going to lock your miter bars either to the outermost section of the slot or the innermost section of the slot. And that way, when you put the mount it to the sled, it won't ever move again, even if the set screws move out of place. Does that make sense? So one goes one way and one goes the other way. So they'll never move again. So that's kind of a really cool technique. What I used to do is just put Teflon tape on them, and this doesn't move either. I put Teflon tape on them to prevent those set screws from backing out, but you don't have to. Just put one set of set screws in one way and the other one the opposite way. That locks them in. All right, so we have washers in the kit. You can use these if that gets the miter bar slightly above your table saw surface. If not, add a coin or something like a dime to get it up a tiny bit higher. Whatever you need to make sure that it's above the surface. And we'll drop it in place there. And then I like to push these 3 inches forward. That's what this is sized for. I think we get the best benefit at 3 inches forward. So you can do the same, and it doesn't have to be exact, just approximately 3 inches forward. And we're ready to go. So we want to put some glue on it, but you want to be able to take and migrate this sled to any other saw in the future. So just put a little bit of glue. Just put drops, about like I'm putting now. If you do that, but you decide if you make a mistake, you can pop them off, or if you decide to move this to a bigger, better table saw in the future that you get, it's very easy. You unscrew the screws, and then you just tap these with a hammer, and they'll pop off. If you saturate these with glue, you will not get the miter bars off. It will destroy your sled if you try. So just put a few drops of glue like this. That's all you need. This glue is extremely strong between metal and wood. And then hold the jig all the way to the right against your fence, and then slowly lower it so it comes right to the front of your saw. I have a chamfer on the front of my saw. I'm going right to the back of that chamfer. And you want to make sure you have this set at 15 and 7/8. 15 and 7/8. That's for everybody's saw. It doesn't matter what. That's the dead center of the sled. That way your kerf cut will fall right down the dead center of the sled. Half the kerf to the right of the center point and half the kerf to the left of the center point. 15 and 7/8. And that's it. We want to just let that sit for a couple of minutes. And I'm showing you there that I've lined it up so that they're coming to the front of the chamfer and we're flush with the fence. When it's done, we can move the fence out of the way. Take off our weights. And then we can screw in the miter bars. Lift up slowly in case you did not leave enough time for the glue to set up. If you left them for 5 minutes, you're fine. But if you left them less than that, then lift up real slow. And just to be safe, I run a quick spray of the activator down both sides. It'll penetrate right up underneath there. You can see it shoot right through. And it'll make sure that those are fully bonded because it cures them instantly. I'm going to pre-drill these holes here, countersink these holes with a VIX bit. It's a self-centering bit. It's not absolutely required. Just make sure you drill the hole in the middle. We'll talk about the importance of the self-centering bit later and what you can do if you don't have one. Seems like a lot of people don't. And just a quick mention is that I am going to, and this video is nearly over. I'm just going to show how to put the sled together in this video. So it's perfectly functional after this. And a day or two, I'm going to release the second part of another video that shows how to attach or how to put together the two main attachments, the miter function and the picture frame functioning part. That'll be a little bit shorter than this. Those are even easier to put together. So we'll just load these up with screws. Get the washers out of the way and drop it in place. Remember, if you would like to have one of these flagship table saw sleds, there is going to be a link in the description below to go and get them. And I have actually just put them back on sale for $100 off. You notice the sled is backwards here. I just always like to do that and make sure I get full, good sliding, both forward and backward with the sled. Make sure there's no binding or anything anywhere. If there is, I might redo the miter bars or I may sand them down just a touch, but it works great. And this is the correct orientation of the sled, of course. All right, next I am going to put in the zero clearance inserts. So they get slid in from the back here. You could slide them in from the front too. Either way, it doesn't matter. And when they're slid in, you can see it's a little bit snug here, but I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to sand them down a teeny tiny bit and try again, and they'll go right in. I don't sand the whole thing down, just a little tip of it where it's going to go underneath the front fence. Sometimes they're a little snug because I've got the front fence screwed down very tight, and there could be a very tiny warp or bow in the zero clearance insert, and that's perfectly normal and no harm, easy to fix. All right, let's go ahead and attach the safety box here. We're just going to put some CA glue on it. That's all we need to attach it. Stuff is extremely strong from wood to wood. I'll put some accelerator on the wood itself. We'll hold it in place. And don't drop it like I just did, because you only have a couple of seconds before it starts to bond. Get a good firm press there once it starts, and it bonds almost instantly. And then we'll go ahead and take the protective film off the top of this acrylic too. And now you can see down in there when the blade pushes through the back fence, and you'll notice stop before it pushes all the way through the back of a safety box. I like to add a little bit of accelerator to the sides to make sure it did get fully bonded. And lastly, I'm going to put in the zero clearance inserts for the fence. It's one of the cool features about this sled. You'll never have tear out on anything you're cutting because these zero clearance inserts will fit right up against wherever the blade is, and there'll be no shredding or tearing of your wood. And if your zero clearance inserts ever wear out, you can simply make another set, or we sell them also on the website. So you'll get good cutting forever. Now we're going to go ahead and make a quick cut through the base. It's very, very important after you make this cut through the base that you do not take off the screws on the front fence, because the back fence has not yet been squared. The 5-cut method, I don't know if I should show it in here or not. I didn't want to really drag this video down a little bit, but I have the 5-cut method showed on my full build video. I'll link that down below. It's pretty straightforward. I believe William Ng invented the 5-cut method, and it's on his website as well. I'll put a link to that. I also have the 5-cut method shown on the other sled that I built, and there's lots and lots of them out there, so I don't really want to bog this down with showing people how to do it. You can avoid the 5-cut method if you don't want that high precision, because it's not necessarily required. You could just use like a precision square or something like that between the fence and the blade, however you like to do it. But once I've cut the blade all the way through, I can go ahead and put these zero clearance inserts in place right up next to the blade. But what I was saying is you don't want to unscrew that front fence until the 5-cut method or the squaring of the back fence is done. Once the squaring of the back fence is done, then you'll load the back fence up with screws, and only then can you take the screws out of the front fence and use the front fence as a removable front fence as you wish, because the back fence will then hold the entire sled together. And there it is. That's all complete. Thanks for watching.